On today's call, we're talking about pricing strategy.
In those situations, customers, have hard budgets. And when we start to push those budgets beyond where they expected it to be, it goes south quickly.
We found after the job, I was doing the project management through the job and kind of getting the hold of the costs and things and just kind of seeing how things go. And we realized that there was no margin in the job, none.
We're constantly adjusting our system to make sure that it is quoting things accurately in terms of labor and margins, right? We're constantly adjusting that. But then on a per job basis, we are approving and modifying and editing every single job before it goes, because you have the salesman's opinion, you have the technician's opinion, you have the operations department's opinion, then you have what's actual.
Welcome to Coffee Break with Jake. We have this call every Friday at 11 a.m. I'm so glad that you're here. The purpose of the call is to bring together security professionals from all over the country and in some cases all over the world to share best practices, to discuss challenges, to identify new opportunities for growth. And I'm so glad that all of you are here. On today's call, we're talking about pricing strategy. I talk to so many folks that sell all kinds of different things, and not all of them are cookie cutter products that they're selling, packages. Sometimes it is very custom. Sometimes it takes some engineering. Sometimes it takes hours, days, weeks, even in some cases, months of back and forth to determine the design of the system. And along the way, it's so important for them to have their pricing dialed in. I talk to folks that do a really great job of ensuring that every single job is profitable, that every single job is estimated in terms of equipment and labor hours accurately. And then I talk to some folks that really struggle with that. And so if you are on the call today, and your company, as a company, or your salespeople have ever struggled with pricing, can you go ahead and just raise your hand for me? All right, so out of 30 some odd people, 10 of them have had pricing struggles. I'd bet there's more. I'd bet there's more amongst us, but you 10 are very brave to admit the fact that you have some pricing complexity or challenges over time. Maybe you've solved for it. Maybe you haven't. Maybe you're on this call because you're hoping to bring some sense and some strategy to your pricing. And I'm so glad that you're here. I'd like to start with Jesse Callahan. Jesse, thanks so much for joining us on the call today. Tell us about the biggest challenge you face with pricing. And don't tell me it's your distributor charges you too much.
No, I think it's when we're selling something that we don't have as much experience selling. If it's a new product or service, like the trailers as an example, it was something that wasn't sure how to go about doing, or if it's putting together a different service package. Those are usually the biggest challenges, is just when something is new or changes significantly.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, right? Anytime something's new, anytime you can't look back at the last 15 jobs with that particular tech stack or that type of environment, a lot of times we use historical data to kind of forecast how long it's going to take us to do something, how much we should charge. I think it's also important to consider with anything new, it's hard to know what the market's willing to accept as a price, right? The trailers are a really great example because I've had some folks that have done trailers and just video monitoring in general, and they take a salesperson that's used to selling $39, $49, $59 a month monitoring, and now they're selling something for $2,000 a month, $2,500 a month, $3,000, $4,000 per month. And that is, not only is it a challenge to determine what that price should be, unless you bought a surveillance trailer from me and I gave you my big red sales playbook, which eliminates all the questions there. But it does make it difficult for your salespeople to confidently price it, right? I think that aside from determining what is a profitable price, having your salespeople going into a presentation with the confidence of knowing, hey, not only is this the right price, but this is a price that people pay. I can tell you that the most exciting thing for me is anytime I see a salesperson's mind blown on what their ability to sell is, right? Like when you go through 6, 7, 8 years of thinking, hey, I can only sell 30, 40, 50, $60 a month alarms, and then they go and sell a video monitoring system or access control, manage access control, and they're charging per door. They're doing, video, cloud video with analytics, and they're charging licensing, and their mind just explodes. And it's a good explosion. It's an epiphany. It's an opportunity for them to realize they can sell more. So really good call out on that, Jesse. Anytime we're selling something new that adds complexity. Now, we've got John Tanner on the call. John, I know that one of the things that I think is cool about companies of your scale is that you have folks like a John Fallon that would go through and kind of take new products and things and evaluate them before it rolls out. And so, just kind of talking about, Jesse identifies complexity involved with selling something new. How do you guys kind of solve for that? And for the folks not on the call, if you'd introduce yourself, but I'd love to know, how you guys kind of solve for complexity and answer those questions before it gets to a proposal.
So I think for new products like Big Red, we have an engineering group, John Fallon heads, and we spend a lot of time kind of reviewing the product line, seeing if we talk to other companies that have sold it, trying to see what's the value add for our business. I think that's a big piece of this, is understanding just because it's new and other people are selling it, does it fit what you do or what you want to offer, or who you want to be, right? Because at the end of the day, if we sell it, we have to support it. So we answer all those questions. We come up with all our pricing models. And then we run a few tests, closed environment, a couple of the reps. We say, hey, who thinks they could sell it? This is what we think we can get for it. Let's go try the market. We do a couple of test runs, really controlled environment. Those test runs always uncover things we just didn't think about or miss that at scale would have crushed us, right? Would have just, been a disaster rollout. But because it's one or two, we have a couple of customers, we're transparent with them. That's the other thing, is when you're testing it, be transparent with the customer. Say, hey, it's a new product. It's new to us, but this is what the industry is doing. As long as you have that relationship, they'll wade with you through some of the challenges. And then you can adjust and refine and then roll it out a little bit more. I think it's that pace that's the most important piece at the end of the day, certainly for new products that you don't have any experience with, because that's a huge challenge.
I just want to call out a couple of things on that. So number one, before rolling something out company-wide, American Alarm does evaluation. They answer as many questions as they can possibly answer from kind of, there's some answers that you can get from a data sheet, right? There's some answers that you can get from a manufacturer salesperson, right? But then there's some answers that you will not get until the rubber meets the road, right? Until you actually go out and install some of these new systems. And I think this idea of making informed decisions, but then the next step is a small bet. Like you're making small bets. Like, hey, we think we have enough information to do this. We're going to do it on a very small scale that's not going to crush us. We're going to evaluate that, and we're going to kind of find it from there. John, has that always been the case, or have you kind of fine-tuned this process over time?
The new product development is probably 6 years for us, maybe 7 years. We've tried a couple of times in the past. Generally, it falls by its own weight because there's so much detail that has to be done when you're evaluating a new product. Even things as simple as marketing materials, like what is your sales team going to need to sell it?
Yeah.
But we've gotten better at it. We've got a dedicated group that meets weekly. We use product called Smart Sheet to help us kind of go through a very consistent checklist. But yeah, it's new for us in that sense. It's only been around for 6 years for us, but we continue to work and press on it as much as possible, and we learn every time, every day.
So, one of the things that I find a lot of our systems integrators, they get, what would I call it? I would call it scope creep, right? Like, this is a scope of work that they might do on jobs based on what the customer is asking them to do, or products that the customer might have in another facility. Especially when you're dealing with a customer that has multiple locations and may have some other technology that you're not familiar with in another on another property. We see sometimes a willingness to kind of jump in with both feet and tackle something new to satisfy a customer need without kind of going through that process. Are your salespeople, are they able to do that? Are they able to kind of take on something that you guys don't normally do if the customer is asking for it? Or do you try to steer that customer back towards what you offer?
Oh, I wish I could tell you that never happens, but it does. I think in those situations, they're some of our best success stories and some of our worst failures that we've ever had. And I think when you go into these kind of situations where you're moving into a territory that you're not familiar with from a product perspective, you just can't allow a creep to happen. Like, it has to be really very defined and very black and white, because until your team truly understands it, until they've seen it in the field and touched it and the customers have tried it and you've gotten feedback on events, actual events, there's so much risk to ruining the relationship. And, I think we all know, and as a company, we spend a lot of time on customer surveys, net promoter score. And so one bad review is crushing. And, it's just something you can't have happen. We really just we won't allow it. It creeps in sometimes because there's a conversation that takes place that's not documented on paper, but we do our best to avoid it as much as possible.
Oh, that's good advice. I think, again, it comes down to, calculated risk. Sometimes we worry about losing a customer because they absolutely need something. But to your point, you might end up losing a customer because they needed something and it didn't work, right? And it was a problem. In an effort, sometimes I think to stretch, sometimes we fail.
I mean, scope creep is almost always going to be associated with a complexity and like two very expensive problems when you don't know exactly what direction you're going. And so in those situations, customers, have hard budgets. And when we start to push those budgets beyond where they expected it to be, it goes south quickly.
No, good point. For everybody on the call, I'm curious if any of you have a good, better, best pricing model. Can you raise your hand for me if you have a good, better, best pricing model for packages, whether that's for surveillance or access control or alarms? I'm curious to know, this is something that comes up a lot, this concept of having kind of predefined packages and packages that meet the various budgets of customers. I'm going to start with Corey. Corey, talk to us real quick about your good, better, best pricing model. Why do you, some of our systems integrators will say, no, we only lead with the best. We don't have different levels of products or packages. We recommend this because it's the best every time, doesn't matter. Tell us why you have a good, better, best pricing model and what it applies to, what category.
Well, for me, it's got to go to the psychology of the person. A lot of it will get acquisitions, and I've got a new low, but my current low is a Neo plus DSC Connect. And so when I have these people that have 1550s and they have, 7 hardwired zones, I try to make an offer that they can't refuse. And even then, at the moment, a lot of people don't want to sign more than, or not a lot, but there's many that don't want to sign more than like so many years. So we usually start with the 5-year for a low down of, like $100 or something. And we move it back a bit. But, I have people that want to do a 1 year and they want to pay $100 down. And I'm going, no, the equipment alone is more than that. But we do that as kind of a baseline. And then I kind of look at alarm.com to see, and the reason why I do Neo, of course, is the DSC Connect is affordable, but should they want a doorbell, a camera, a thermostat, anything that's alarm.com related, we can change the cell out and we don't have to change out the entire panel again. We prefer Qualsys, but it just depends on the customer. Any Concord, I'm pretty much, with the exception of ones that are only hardwired. The only option I really have is an IQ when they got 10, 20 zones, because I'm not going to do a 433 host and then a RE524XC. That's just going to be a Frankenstein monster. So I don't want to do that, but we try to offer that. And I guess alarm.com has a universal communicator. So I'm looking at that, but our good to some degree, depending on the situation, is literally just throwing an M2M on it to just resolve all the landline issues. The biggest issue I have at the moment is telling customers you have to get off landline. That's just my recommendation. There's far too many variables. There's 3 people in the room and they're only yelling at me, not AT&T, not Spectrum. And I get them to read their landline disclosure. I said, well, they give you 0.0% guarantee. We give you 99.99%, and that's just because it's boilerplate towards cell. Cell's not 100% perfect, but that's my recommendation, is to get everybody to a baseline of at least a Neo plus DSC Connect. And then hopefully in 3 years, if they're interested in video doorbells, cameras, we swap the cell and go to alarm.com.
I think it's important here to kind of mention that you have a good, better, best, it sounds like, or at least a good and better, or a better and best. What you don't have is you don't have a bad, good, better, best, right? I think that so often we see folks willing to step down to bad as an option, right? Like good, better, best, cool, but bad is not an option. Like in your case, it sounds like you have said, hey, we're not willing to have a Frankenstein of a system. You said Frankenstein, right? That is a choice that you make to say, hey, look, from a liability perspective, from a reliability perspective, from a serviceability perspective, we have set standards for what we're willing to do and we won't go below it. Are there times, Corey, where you have folks that want you to do something less than what your standards are, and do you walk away from that?
I don't know if I'd say walk away. I mean, I still have acquisition customers on Concord Express, and they just want a new keypad. And I'm trying to tell them that, for me to get that is, let's say it's $480. It'd be easier to go with the new system that's viable, that's modern, that's still being taken care of, than to go and dig out, a specific model or something like that. But yeah, I've had some that, I don't know, I've even had some odd ones where they think if we add our cell to their panel, their monthly should go down. And I'm trying to explain to them that they're paying for a landline plus the alarm, and the cell is a swing away from the landline itself. And but yeah, it really just ends in a quagmire. Once someone's like, well, can you just give me the same panel? Can you give me an Apex 6100? Can you just give me another one of those? And no, it's not worth it. I don't know. Do you know the programming? Do you know how to, put your codes in? Oh, I
hope you're not asking me, because I don't know the programming. I'll tell you that.
The client. I asked the client, we have, what is that one, Acron and Akron or whatever. We still have 2 of them, and they won't give me their email to, keep them informed. And I looked at the user manual. It's my birth year. It's 1987. I'm like, do you guys know how to add codes to your panel? Oh, we don't know anything. We just arm and disarm. And I'm like, well, I mean, even a Neo plus DSC Connect is very affordable. And I'm like, we want it to work.
You know what, Corey, you quit trying to upsell these people and rip them off. They got a perfectly fine working system. It's been in there since 1992 and it's working just fine. So, take your salesman hat off and just fix it for them, Thanks so much for sharing, Corey. We've got Kirk on the call. Kirk, tell us about good, better, best. Why do you have 3 different levels of packages and pricing?
Well, I think it's important with someone mentioned the psychology of selling, and I think by having a good, better, best, I'm trying to sell the middle one. So the good kind of most people don't want to go with the least, and most people don't want to go with the highest, but there's that middle ground that most people are comfortable with. I'd say 80%. So I think that's part of the psychology of it. And then I also go back to some sales training I had a couple of decades ago by Tom Peters. And, somebody would say, well, how much does a security system cost? And say, so what's a good way to answer that? And what he would teach is, you would say most of the people who get one of our security systems spend, let's just take this environment of maybe a custom residential home for example. Say most people spend about $2,500 on a security system. There are a fortunate few that might spend 10 grand or more. And then we have some people on a fixed or limited budget that can invest as little as $500. Now tell me, which one of those people are you? And you kind of put that framework out there. I also think it's really important that your quoting software have options available. People like options. With that in tune, we just recently switched to a new software called Portal. And one thing I really like about Portal is it connects directly to distribution pricing. So I don't know how connected you are with Jake with Portal, but I'd highly recommend you check that out if you're not, because I really like to get that live pricing. We really got stuck.
This coffee break brought to you by Gauge with Portal. I love it.
I mean, we got stung bad during COVID with all the pricing increases, and we were quoting old pricing, and that was maybe 20, 30%, lower. And
that's actually, I want to stop you for just a second there. I think that's actually a really important consideration. There's so many folks on the call that may not have updated their pricing, their package pricing, the a la carte pricing that their service techs might have within the past year, 2 years, 3 years. And I can tell you that is there's a huge risk of, profit leakage there, right? Like you're losing money if you don't adjust when your prices go up. It could just be a small difference, but over time that really does take effect. And so, Kirk, I think that's really a good call out. I will talk to the folks there. We were looking at doing some stuff for syncing, but thank you for that. I think that's, you talk about options. I've always found that the middle of the road product is a dog for us in distribution. Like we have some guys that want to go with the highest end product, like every single time. And we have folks that want it. It's just price. It's just give me the cheapest possible thing. And these poor guys in the middle that make a pretty good product and it's priced well. It's not as high as this, but it's not as cheap as that. We always struggle with that. And so I'm curious though, when you talk about 3 options, is one of those options what I would consider to be a false option, like an option that you throw it into the mix, but maybe it's priced way too high, or all 3 of these you're fully prepared and expecting they might go with?
So to answer that, no, I would never give anybody a false option. We have too many good. We're in a great time to be in this business with awesome selections. A couple examples. Number one, in video, right? So in video, we lead with, we used to lead with Dawa. Now we lead with Hike. I know there's a lot of people that'd be dead set against that. So our entry level, our cheap is Hike. Our middle ground is DW, and our higher ground is Hanwha. And that's how I explain it. And sometimes we do a conversation, and I explain to them, hey, cheap Chinese, we got good quality American software with quality cameras. And then we have Hanwha, South Korean, they make everything, and I kind of explain it that way. And that's how we lead there. And then, and then I also mentioned alarm.com, which is kind of an anomaly because it's a cloud-based system. So it's a little bit different in the application. Another one that we would differentiate on is our support plans. So now with Portal, we are offering a bronze, which is our 1-year warranty that comes with free. We give them a silver support plan and then a gold support plan. So we're giving you those 3 support plans on every quote now. And we're seeing our support plans go way up by including that in every proposal. And the last one is monitoring, kind of like what the guy was mentioning before. We have like basic monitoring at $29. We have advanced monitoring at $39, which would include like alarm.com. And then, we offer additional services beyond that, virtual monitoring, as far as, video verification. That's kind of how we separate our support and monitoring plans.
How many salespeople are out selling those various packages?
3.
I think that, number one, it's awesome to have so many options to support your customers. For a lot of the folks on the call here, as you're designing packages, I would encourage you to kind of consider some of the complexity with training and onboarding new salespeople, because for a new salesperson, it can be really hard to understand the nuanced differences between 3 different platforms. When you have long tenured salespeople with lots of industry experience that can, differentiate between, I tell you, if you can confidently and successfully differentiate between DW and Hanwha, which are basically have almost the same software, like that takes a lot of understanding and experience to do it. And so I just want to propose to the folks in the call, if you're hiring new salespeople and you come up with different packages, consider at least the potential for simplifying packages for those new salespeople. I would like to propose to those in the call that are thinking about how they can put together good, better, best packages, right? Because there's probably some folks in the call that just do a custom system every time. And that's awesome. Custom systems are great. You go through, you do an actual site walk, you do a proposal listing, let's talk alarm systems. We're doing a full perimeter. We're doing smoke detectors. We're doing glass breaks, the whole thing. And you put together a line item quote of everything, and your customer's head explodes, but their neighbor just got broken into and they buy it anyways, right? The idea of creating packages really streamlines it for your salespeople and creates a perception and a real perception of perceived value in packages and savings. People do when they're buying, like, you like to be able to think like, hey, I'm saving money by getting this particular package. I alluded to this a little bit, the idea of a false option. I want to clarify what I don't mean is creating an option that is a lie, right? Like, but if you are putting together packages that are good, better, best, if your middle package is marginally better than your good package, and your best package is only marginally better than your middle package, you have somebody that has to spend a lot of time deciding between each, right? So if I have 3 options, if good, better, and best are really close together, right? There's not a huge amount of differentiation between them. It can be really hard for people to decide on which one to get. And so if you are putting together packages for your salespeople, consider and test it if you get a chance, but have your good package, have a marginally better package that's nearly priced as high as your best package. And what you'll find is, from what I've heard from salespeople that are better than me, that middle option can serve as a false option or a decoy option. It's not that it's not an available option, but because the price is only marginally lower than the best option, and the best option is much better than the good option, now they're no longer comparing all 3. They're just saying, hey, this option is really the best. It's the closest to what I want. And gosh, it's only a little bit more than the other one. So just a thought on pricing strategy. If anybody does that, if you have a model like that, I'd love it if you throw it in the chat. If you don't, or you're considering it and you do test it out, I'd love your feedback on it. Guys, I'm curious if anybody on the call has made a huge pricing mistake on a job, particularly on a large project. Would you raise your hand for me if you're no good, rotten salesperson who knows better and should have known better? Has anybody had the experience of having a salesperson just price a job totally wrong? Steve, talk to me about that pricing failure.
Yeah, so I can't completely blame my salesperson about it.
Sure you can. They're not here.
He literally is no longer here.
Oh,
Yeah, So
The going away present for you.
it was definitely a going away present. So we use a locked pricing tool that, normally you can't make any manipulations to. And we found after the job, I was doing the project management through the job and kind of getting the hold of the costs and things and just kind of seeing how things go. And we realized that there was no margin in the job, none. We sold it at complete cost. I
You
think
should be
we
in the
ended-
distribution business. That's what I do every day.
So it was at cost, and I think we actually ended up losing maybe $2,000 or $3,000. Now, mind you, this was like a $90,000 project. So I mean, it was just I couldn't believe that
Can I
it
stop you
slipped
for
through
just
the
a
fingers.
second?
Yeah.
How long did it take you?
It took
project.
me the second month in.
How many hours would you say you had into this job with your techs and all that? Labor hours.
200-hour project.
Okay, so I want to throw this out there. No margin on the job.
No.
200-hour project.
Yep.
Steve did not just lose the money that was on that project. He also lost the money that he could have made on profitable projects. And
Yep.
so I suspect that none of the folks on this call are in business to keep their techs out in the field for no money, right? Like everybody's in the business of making money. And so this concept of opportunity cost comes in, right? You have an opportunity cost when you spend time doing one thing that makes you no money, and you could have spent that time doing something that makes you money. And so the unseen, uncalculated, but very real opportunity cost of 200 hours in the field is probably, I would bet, at a minimum, $10, $12, $15,000 in profitable labor hours that you might have had even if you were just doing service. So just a thought on that. So what did you do? You fired this guy right afterwards, or did you kill him?
I wanted to do both, but no, he ended up leaving on his own accord.
How did it get to the point that the job got quoted, got approved, and got scheduled? And I don't mean to be harsh here, Steve. I'm not setting
Not
you up
harsh,
for
and,
this.
and Kurt's sitting there pointing his finger at me. Yep, absolutely, I get it. Yeah, I mean, I completely own the screw up, even though it was. I can't blame my salesperson. I can only blame myself by not doing my own due diligence and not doing the right thing and letting it slip. I had gotten a lot of confidence in my salesperson, trusted him completely to do everything right. He's very smart guy. Everything that he's been done has always been perfectly executed in the past. This one, I have no excuse, but it did happen, and it is what it is. But it's a lesson learned. I don't let anything go out the door without me looking at it again. I don't care how small or how big it is. If I don't get my eyes on it and scrutinize it, it's not going anywhere. And it's just, it's me being soft and trusting somebody a little bit too much too soon. And, we all got to learn those lessons. And I've been doing this for 30 years, and it isn't the first time it's happened. It's just, one of those things that it just happened.
Shame on you. Gosh, man, you really screwed that one up. No, first of all, thank you for sharing that story, admitting your role in it, right? Learning from it, because I think it's there's a lot of folks on this call that may not have experienced that yet, but maybe they just hired a rock star sales rep who's knocking it out of the park. And man, this guy is just doing great things. His last 6 jobs were wildly profitable. He's doing so good, and you say, listen, buddy, you just go do whatever you want, right? Because you are the best thing since sliced bread. But what you don't know is that he's got a credit card bill to pay. He's burned through his commissions, and that big project that he was quoting, he'll do absolutely anything to get it, because he knows he's got to get that deal done. And all of a sudden, your rock star sales rep, maybe it's just bad math, but your rock star sales rep prices a job totally wrong. Now, if you have safeguards, guardrails in place, your system doesn't allow it. It doesn't get approved. It doesn't get scheduled. It gets kicked back, right? John talked about their software kind of escalating through a tech review. I think there's a review to make sure it's profitable, and then it can go out to the customer. Some of you may not have the systems in place to allow for that level of complexity. But if you do, gosh, I think that's important. And at the very least, kind of setting some guardrails on a manual review for any project over X. Again, and you have to look at calculated risk, right? Like you can't possibly go through, your system can allow for a certain level of discounts. Your system can, do some automatic things. But like, if some guy quotes a $2,000 camera job without you having to personally approve it, okay. Cool, sell 10 of those a week, whatever the case might be. And we're just going to look at it after the fact and evaluate whether or not those jobs are we're checking it, but maybe not checking it in advance. That's an option. But when you're quoting a job that's going to tie your techs up for 200 hours, man, you got to make sure you've got that going through an approval process. I want to go to David Clark. David Clark, bare your soul to us, my man. Tell us how you screwed up.
Hey, Jake. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. Thanks, Melanie, for letting me know this forum even existed when I met her a couple of weeks ago. This is awesome. So I'm glad to be a part of it.
Glad to have you here.
Yeah. So what we had is we found a loophole in our scope change process where the job itself, when it was quoted, was great. But during this process, it was about a 60 camera job, and they decided they got some additional funding. The scope change on the equipment side went through fine, but they forgot the labor. So we lost almost 100 hours of labor on this job when we went through and did the scope change. Now, luckily, the first part of the job had good margin on it, so we didn't go negative, but salesperson didn't get his commissions because he dropped down below his rates he needed to his targets he was set for. So loophole that he found in the approval process of scope changes, the full job was approved, everything worked great. So we've closed that loophole, but it was painful to learn.
It's a good thing you realized it, though. Like, I talked to, had a hard conversation. Sometimes I have to have hard conversations with some of the small business owners that we do business with because, they're just not watching. They're just not watching anything. They're just so busy doing the work that they're not keeping an eye on things. And I think about one in particular. Just recently, we were on the phone. He was behind on his invoices. Okay, super nice guy. We had a very nice conversation. But when he explained to me that this particular customer that he was working with they get paid in 30 days. Right. He's like, well, they're paying me in 30 days. And he's explaining to me that they're going to be caught up with X amount in 10 days. And I explained to him, well, we give you 60 days. Right. And so if they're paying you in 30, you're buying the parts as you need them. They're paying you in 30 days. We're giving you 60. We shouldn't have this. Right. But he wasn't watching. Super nice guy, but he wasn't watching. And he had to really he had to slow down and take a look at the finances of his business. And so for anybody that's on this call, whether it's job costing or your accounts payable, how much cash you have in the bank, you got to keep an eye on these things. David found a loophole in his system that may have gone unnoticed if they didn't have some level of examination, right? Like, how do we look at this? How do we audit this? How do we make sure that we're profitable? Since everybody else has shared a time that they screwed up, I had 2 years ago, something got messed up in our system. We've gone through an ERP change. We had $1 million surplus in inventory and not enough cash in the bank. And I'm like, good God, what happened? And what happened is I was so caught up in the growth and so caught up in a new software and so caught up in hiring new employees that I didn't look at the fundamentals. And so thankfully it was all fine. Over the next 60 days, we got, I put cash in, it was all good, right? We lowered inventory levels. But for those of you on this call, we're talking about things that require oversight. Pricing is one of them, right? And this is something that if you're not looking at your jobs and figuring out whether or not you're actually making money, you could spend a lot of time running around, working lots and lots of hours and not making any money. So David, thank you so much for sharing that. Guys, I would encourage you, if you don't already, put together reporting. Thank you, Gage, for noting that. You need to have some standard reports to where you are. Yeah, good call out on that, Melanie. You don't have time not to. You have to be looking at this stuff. I get a daily dashboard, and God, I couldn't run this business without my dashboard. I have to see a few important metrics every day. Whatever my guys have sold you, the following day I'm reviewing what our margins were on it. And sometimes I see that they gave Corey Keys a heck of a deal and we lost money. And I say, you know what? Corey's a pretty good guy. So it's okay with me if we lose money on Corey, but let's try to be better with everybody else. Pricing doesn't happen in a vacuum. We talk about pricing and margins and is it profitable or isn't it profitable? And wouldn't it be nice if we just got to decide what our prices were and whether or not our customers were going to take it, and we didn't have to worry about competitors undercutting pricing, right? But we do. There's all kinds of crazy competitors out there that are willing to do all kinds of crazy things. And so if you have ever had a scenario where there was a competitor in town that just seemed to be undercutting you on jobs and you couldn't figure it out, you couldn't understand how it was sustainable, could you raise your hand for me? Nobody's ever had a competitor in town. These guys are all the most competitive. Then you may be that guy. What I worry about is if you don't know that guy, you could be that guy. So raise your hand for me if you're not that guy, but you've experienced it. I'm going to start with Kirk. Kirk, tell us about the guy that was undercutting you in town, unlicensed, uninsured, whatever the case might be.
Well, there's a ton of, AKA truck slammers out there, really don't know what they're doing. And, it's one thing to sell a job, right? But it's another one to make money on it, right? Yeah, we have a competitor. They're one of our main competitors here in town. They're not a trunk slammer. They have a couple salespeople that are in the habit of underbidding the labor like by 50%. And they're winning jobs because of that. They have a good RMR base. So I think they're able to maybe stomach that, and perhaps they don't have the greatest measurements, in play because, we've hired a few people that have worked there. So we kind of have the inside scoop. But it's hard to compete when you're not competing against someone and they're not, pricing their jobs properly.
I want to point out something that you mentioned. You mentioned that they may have RMR that allows them to kind of do that. I think that top line revenue can hide a lot of stuff. Right? We're in a business that has, or y'all are in a business. I'm not in a business. I should have been in the business far more. You're in a business that's got recurring monthly revenue. And if you're not careful, you can start paying a lot of other people's bills with your recurring monthly revenue. You could have salespeople. I can't tell you how many times I have met, and I've talked about this guy before. I've met him a million times. He's not actually the same guy, but there's clones of him in hundreds of alarm companies all around the country. He is a lazy, coffee drinking, snacking, because he's always snacking when I talk to him. He's always snacking when I talk to him. Guy that sits in the office and runs out anytime there's a company lead and goes and does the paperwork, right? And this guy is paid handsomely to sit in the office and wait for a company lead to come in, and he does the paperwork, and the company doesn't mind because they've got recurring monthly revenue coming in every month. And well, gosh, we need that guy. And the reason we need that guy is because Kirk wants to sit on the back porch drinking coffee on the coffee break with Jake, right? And if he didn't have that guy, he'd have to be in the office waiting for those deals to come in and closing them himself. And I can tell you that it's very dangerous if you are not looking at profitability on these jobs, if you're not looking at the revenue that guy, we're going to give that guy a name. That guy's name's Phil. If you're not looking at the revenue that Phil is generating on a monthly basis and how that covers the overhead of having Phil in a salaried position in a company vehicle with great health insurance and a 401k, if you're not calculating that, you really run the risk of being Kirk's competitor. And Kirk's competitor may not know, metaphorically speaking, I mean, unless you're in Indianapolis, I don't think you're Kirk's competitor, but you could end up being the guy that's got sales reps out there underestimating the labor. You could be out there generating RMR, but not being profitable. You could find yourself just kind of treading water at some point, because that RMR is paying for your techs and your salespeople to be busy, but it's not helping you to fund the growth of your company. You know, we're talking about some pricing strategies here without getting into the specifics of pricing strategy. But I think understanding why we're looking at pricing is more important than exactly what you charge for a camera, right? Because I could ask each of you what you charge to install a camera, and it would be different. Different cameras, different labor costs, all those things. If anybody is using a tool right now for reporting, if you have a tool that you use to report on cost of jobs, can you raise your hand for me? Software, some kind of tool. Oh, yes. All right, Mr. Taylor Sears, talk to me real quick about how you look at profitability before and after a job is completed.
So one thing to talk about earlier, we have an approval process where our quoting system has a bunch of criteria in terms of dollar amount of the job, RMR, margins, specific job types. For example, if we do central vacuum, and it doesn't matter if it's a $5 central vacuum, that can't get quoted unless it's approved by my dad. So, I mean, we have a lot of stuff that helps. So what we do is our operations teams does two things. One, we're constantly adjusting our system to make sure that it is quoting things accurately in terms of labor and margins, right? We're constantly adjusting that. But then on a per job basis, we are approving and modifying and editing every single job before it goes, because you have the salesman's opinion, you have the technician's opinion, you have the operations department's opinion, then you have what's actual. So we're constantly trying to find what's accurate and actual in that stuff. So that's how we approve them on the front end. But then as far as job costing, we job cost every single job with our system. We use Sedona Office, and we pull those reports. And one thing that's made a huge difference is we actually changed the commission structure of some of our operational management team, where they are paid, and a portion of their pay comes from the actual P&L of the installation project. So that when that started impacting people's pay, that's made a big impact on us being more profitable. Somebody was talking about how you decide on new projects and new parts and all this kind of stuff. We decided several years ago that we are not all things to all people. Like, that is not our business model at all. So we are super picky, and the only time, we'll add new products as alarm.com and some of that things brings stuff out. But in terms of things that are outside of what we do on a daily basis, whether it's a platform, or it's a specific part, or maybe it's a specific type of reader for an access control system, if we don't see that there's an opportunity for that to be part of our everyday business from that part day moving on, we just say no to it for a lot of reasons that we don't have time to talk about.
Well, Taylor, I'm always impressed. I'm always impressed with the level of reporting that you all have and the way that you run the business there. By the way, I'd love at some point, we need to spend some time unpacking some of the reporting that you guys have, because it's some of the best I've seen. But you mentioned specifically differing opinions of how long something's going to take based on the salesperson, the technicians, operations. And I think that misalignment is one of the greatest dysfunctions of so many companies and sources of frustration for those different people, because a salesperson says, well, if that technician could do it faster, if they weren't, we'll just say if they were faster, this job would have gotten done within the time that I'd allotted for it. And the technician says, if that salesperson had any idea what I'd be dealing with on this job, and I've got a firewall up here. There's no way I can get a wire where they said I was. These guys are crazy. You need to put them in the field in the attic with me for 6 months before they can quote anything. And then you have operations saying, gosh, I wish, this is just totally off, right? And they're frustrated. Everybody's frustrated. John, I'm going to go to you for this. We've talked about this before. Your technicians and your salespeople are both incentivized to get within that. Can you explain? Because I think that's a very important part of this. Again, pricing doesn't happen in a vacuum. We have to realize that there's inputs, and a lot of that comes in the form of human capital. So talk to us about how you get your salespeople and your techs aligned there.
Yeah, it's simple. We have profit sharing. We incentivize the technicians and the salespeople to establish margin at the end of the job. And as long as the margin is at a decent level, then there's profit to be paid out. I think, Wells Sampson says it so often, and he says, I love pie. He says, I love slicing up pie and giving everybody a piece of pie, right? And I think that's a cornerstone for the company. And when you give technicians an opportunity to, boost their hourly rate by being efficient and watching the details, and when you boost salespeople's commission, you give them a little bit of something up front that says, hey, great job. You found it. You brought it in. It looks good. Here's a little thank you. Your big money is going to come at the end when we close this whole thing out and put all the costs in. And when they see that and they see the two sides working together, you can get some pretty powerful results pretty quickly. It doesn't take much. I mean, it doesn't take much.
Well, I'll say this. I love pie. I love pizza pie. I love pizza pie from Colony Grill in Stamford, Connecticut. And it's the best pie. And you can get your own pie because I'm going to eat the whole pie by myself. No, guys, I think this concept of incentivizing people based on profitability of the jobs is really you're incentivized as business owners. If you're a business owner on this call, your incentive is based on the profitability of the job, right? And so you want it to be profitable. If your people are incentivized based on the profitability of jobs, then they'll look to make it profitable. And if you're all finding that, hey, this isn't profitable, then you adjust, right? You adjust your pricing, you adjust your inputs, you adjust your salespeople and your technicians if you have to, right? But you want to make sure that your pricing strategy is rational, that it makes sense, and that you're checking to make sure you make money every month. Guys, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to get to everybody. Rents, we can discuss this over pizza because you're in Connecticut as well. I do want to thank all of you for jumping on the call today. We do this call every Friday at 11 a.m. If you do business with us today, I want to thank you for that. I really appreciate the many folks on here that do business with us. Thank you for your business. If you don't do business with us today, I'd love to support you. We're a broadline distributor carrying all kinds of security and low voltage products. We'll print your logo on it for free. But whether you do business with us or not, you're always welcome on this call. You're also welcome, if you haven't already, to join the Electronic Security Association. ESA is the largest trade association representing security and life safety companies here in the States. And so I would love for you to join and support that association. I am running for board of directors. And if you haven't already voted, I would greatly appreciate your vote. I'm very passionate about this industry. And I'm really hoping to bring the perspective and the voices of all of you to the decision-making table with ESA. So thank you so much. I hope you all have a great weekend. And if you get a chance, Colony Grill Pizza. Thanks, guys.